Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. So it was this week in 1876 that music, and European classical music in particular, changed forever. And this was because it was the premiere of the first complete performance of Wagner's Ring Cycle, a cycle of four operas, including Das Rheingold, the Valkyrie, Siegfried, and Goethe-Dämmerung. Those four operas together make up the Ring Cycle. Now, why was this important? It was important because it brought European classical music and opera in particular to the masses. And this was a process that really began before Wagner. You could say it began with Beethoven, with the orchestra outgrowing the small public halls and chambers. Where do we get chamber music from? And the chambers of aristocratic manners. It also showed that at the same time, it was becoming proper entertainment beyond for the masses, beyond private entertainment for the elite or liturgical or music for liturgical purposes. Because before the 19th century, the primary places you would hear the music that today we call European classical music would be in the aristocrat's chamber or in church, particularly Catholic and Protestant churches. I've done a whole video on why in Russia and other Orthodox Christian countries this was very different. But Beethoven began to change all that. And Wagner was a great disciple of Beethoven, who took the musical ethos and essence and message of Beethoven's masterwork, his final symphony, the Ninth, and he took this to scales hitherto unknown in the world of music. He did this in terms of harmonies that were ever more sophisticated, orchestrations that were ever more lush, narratives that were ever more philosophical and complex in terms of their intricacies, and in terms of the marketing. Because Wagner did not see his music as the charge of the aristocracy. In fact, he began his early life as a revolutionary minded person and even participated in some actual political revolutions. He was someone who was really busily engaged in inventing a hypothetical 20th century, an optimistic 20th century in the middle of the 19th. Now, the 20th century, because of war, probably isn't as optimistic as optimists of the 19th century like Wagner would have liked. But nevertheless, he was a new man creating a new music, but one that was deeply rooted in European and Germanic traditions. And that was really another important innovation in The Ring and many of Wagner's middle period operas, insofar as he took ancient themes from Germanic history and mythology and combined it with a very modern way of telling a tale. Even opera, he invented a new way of thinking about opera that few have successfully been able to manage since Wagner. And this is skewed the entire idea of the aria, where basically you have aria, overture, filler, aria, filler, another overture to begin the second act, filler, aria, filler. And it was a style that was obviously the quintessential opera style, but it was kind of lazy. With Wagner, everything flowed. There were no unnatural pauses. Everything was everything else. It was a cohesive piece where the singers really took a back seat to the orchestra, and the orchestra existed to create music that was bigger than any one instrument, bigger than any one motif. Wagner's music was larger than life, as was his popularity. His popularity around Europe and North America grew and grew throughout his lifetime. He was a classical music superstar. And the operas, of course, that he composed were generally quite lengthy. And the Ring Cycle as a whole is made up of four operas, which, even when you hear standalone performances, are very long. Obviously, they're not all performed in one day. I think at one point, someone as a novelty gimmick tried to do that, but it's over, obviously, a series of days, which is, I think, again, there's some some parallels to the liturgical calendar there, where different days mean different things. And that's not to suggest that Wagner thought that he was equal to, or let alone better than, religion, but it does show that there was a very spiritual aspect to Wagner, one that actually would grow, especially after The Ring, when he reconciled his ideas about modern sociological revolutions, ancient German mythology, and perpetual Christianity. That would be reconciled later on in Parsifal, his last great masterwork. But everything he did from the early, middle to the late period was very special, and none of it really showed any musical lack of maturity. He was truly, along with Beethoven, one of the titans of the 19th century, which was a very crowded decade in European classical music, to be sure, mainly because of Wagner. I want to end by telling you a story about the creation of the opera house at Bayreuth in Munich, in southern Germany, that Wagner had a hand in creating. He wanted to build a modern opera house big enough and, frankly, good enough to handle the immense orchestras and sophisticated staging of his Ring operas. And he was adamant that there were no boxes in the opera house. Now, what boxes are, they're literally like a little private balcony, if you will, with maybe 2 to 6 people maximum who can sit in them. And what that represented was elitism. The regular old people were on the ground, which in it has different names. Some countries call it the stalls section, some call it the orchestra section, and then others, the aristocrats, the big patrons, the men of letters, and all the rest of it were in the boxes. Wagner didn't want that. Wagner wanted a kind of semicircular setup so that everyone could have a position of equality when watching his operas. And I think that was quite special because, as a true revolutionary, his operas were bigger than anyone in the audience, and he never let them forget it either. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.